this is the end of not the end. It's just the current point of a very long saga for me. I come from a CIA family. I was an only child born in Washington D.C. My mother was a cryptanalyst with the Army Security Agency during World War II. Her product went to Franklin Roosevelt and Secretaries Stinson and Hull. Dad was a decorated Air Force veteran, went to work for Lockheed Martin on CIA projects. That's the family I grew up in, which kind of marked me from birth. But I'm a UCLA grad. I'm a former LAPD cop. I started. What a long story. It's like Forrest Gump. Coming from a CIA family, the CIA tried to recruit me, and I caught CIA dealing drugs in the 1970s. I resigned in protest. I was receiving death threats at the time, earning the highest rating reports possible. But conscience made me turn into a whistleblower. And so that evolved. I became an investigative journalist, and I began exposing a great many scandals in the U.S. government. I had a publication for 8 years called From the Wilderness. The archives are still there at fromthewilderness.com. Probably our greatest journalistic coup was that we, thanks to documents provided by Mary Tillman, we meaning myself and Stan Goff, great writer from U.S. Army Special Forces. He's retired. We broke the Pat Tillman cover-up, which brought down 3 generals, 6 senior officers, and I'm pretty convinced made Donald Rumsfeld get out of the Pentagon. I've been an activist for a long time. But I was introduced to peak oil in 2001, shortly after the events of 9/11. I also did a great deal of investigative journalism around the events of September 11th. All of that, including my earliest work on peak oil, was contained in a book, Crossing the Rubicon, The Decline of the American Empire at the End of the Age of Oil. And I'm going to and this is my newest book, Confronting Collapse, which is the companion book to the documentary Collapse by Chris Smith and Blue Mark Films that was received so well around the world. Much thinner. This is probably the best starting place to fully understand. You will not need anything more than high school arithmetic, mathematics, to understand it, and common sense, but it really paints the picture. So I've been in movies, and now I'm doing TV things, and I have CollapseNet, which is doing very well. And I have evolved over the years, like everybody else has, and like you will as you come to understand this situation. And I just want to get the message across. There's a lot of us here who have been preparing the welcome mat for you, so you're not facing this alone.
When I ask you questions, Mike, I need the simplest answer, not the shortest, but the simplest explanation possible, realizing that some people will know immediately what you're talking about, but many will need more information or the background to what you're saying. So just as I started with Jim Kunstler, where are we in the collapse right now?
The pace of collapse is accelerating. We are at what many in the peak oil movement have called the cliff event, where we leave a bumpy plateau of up and down oil prices as the economy collapses. And now peak oil is biting hard, and there is no way to go but down the cliff of any way you want to measure it, whether it's population, food consumption, GDP. We are going off that cliff right now.
Okay, there are many people who believe we have gone off that cliff, but now that we have that knowledge, what's next? What can we do?
Okay, it's very clear that the first thing that people need to get is the immediacy of this. You know, it's sad that this message wasn't heard by more people, but it has been screamed loudly for well more than a decade by some giants, in my opinion, some men who have paid enormous prices, and I'm one of those. I've been at this for over a decade now. But you have to get there's very little time. So ultimately, the first thing we have to do is not to start to try to plan to live in a post-peak oil world. There is going to be a period of transition. That's a term that I coined in 2003, where industrial civilization collapses before a new human paradigm emerges from that wreckage. So you need to prepare to survive the transition. The first and foremost thing is local food production. If you can at all do anything right now, start growing food in your backyard. But there's a whole lot more that can be done and is being done. And there's a large and growing network and movement of information sources all around the country. They can be found in many places. I have my own company, CollapseNet.com, but we have a directory with more than 1,000 listings covering all of this. This is not something you have to come into and believe that you have to invent the wheel from scratch. There's a lot of us been working hard to do that.
I just read an article yesterday that said we were one bad harvest away from catastrophe. Give us a little bit of the background on why that's true.
Well, as as I said clearly in the film Collapse, there are 10 calories of hydrocarbon energy involved in producing every calorie of food that we eat in the industrialized world today. We first published an article on that at From the Wilderness, my old newsletter, in 2002 called Eating Fossil Fuels. There was a slight increase in the rate of human population growth when we discovered coal. But clearly, at the time that the human race discovered oil, the population curve became vertical. And that curve became vertical because the food supply was vertical. The problem is, of course, that we have reached the limits of growth on a finite planet. The topsoil is depleted. We grow the food that we eat today just by pouring chemicals on it, and the underlying topsoil is in most cases just a dead sponge. So that's just one of many problems that are all here right now.
Can you even predict, Mike, what we're going to be seeing as far as prices in the future?
We all know how this is going to play out, more or less. But obviously, we're going to be looking at $5 gasoline in the U.S. Within a very short period of time. And that's unavoidable because of peak oil. We've passed the peak in production, and yet demand is increasing in an infinite growth economic paradigm. But a lot of this work has been done. So what you can expect is enormous price increases for food, which we're seeing all over the world now. Some of that's a deep result of quantitative easing too by the Federal Reserve, but inflationary pressures are clear everywhere. And as we see things break down, what we document at CollapseNet, I have a world news desk there, and we scan world news events very thoroughly and bring you the results daily, is that blackouts in major cities around the world are increasing both in frequency and duration. And they will become permanent at some point. And that's unavoidable because of growth as China is now. The fact is we're running out of everything. So you need to prepare for interruptions in foods. That's why I've been recommending to my subscribers a 3-month food supply on hand, stored. And I put out that emergency alert in July of 2010. That's how clear these events have been. You also need to anticipate massive civil unrest, and that's something that not a lot of people are prepared to talk about right now, but I am, because it's clear. And leading up to the events in Wisconsin and around the states, we were predicting these events 4 or 5 months before they happened. So we have a map of what's coming.
Where can I go to research these topics? Where can I start?
There's a huge number of resources available out there. That's what I've dedicated CollapseNet to doing, among other things. We have an absolutely free directory with more than 1,090 hand-picked listings sorted by category that will lead you to all of this. There is instruction available. There are people who have been living this life and making the transition for years. And that's the most important resource that any of us have, is our friends, is our people who are close to us. Without a community of some kind, I don't think anybody's going to make it through this. Ben Franklin, we must all hang together, else we shall surely hang separately, but you need your own tribe. But there's a lot of wisdom out here, and people are aching to give it away. That's the good part. But I've been deeply involved with Transition US in Sebastopol, California, where I'm moving soon. That's a clue. They are growing exponentially, and we just were able to help with some help from me, push them over $100,000 matching grant, a challenge grant. So they have $200,000 and they're getting lots of requests. That's definitely what people need as a part of their preparation. There are other areas that they don't address, and nobody claims to be a Walmart for transition.
You're unique in always being upfront in saying, this is what's happening right now. I remember from watching Collapse, there are so many people who say, show it to me, show me right now. You've been talking about civilization collapse for the last year. It's going to happen. It is happening. You know, Dmitry Orlov said, if you opened your eyes, you'd see that we're halfway down the road.
Yeah, I love Dmitry. He's one of my oldest friends. I was first to publish him at From the Wilderness in 2002, and he's just become a giant, and that wonderful Russian sense of humor. In my two books, in Crossing the Rubicon, published in 2004, I described the world that we're living in today, right now. I predicted these events. In my second book, Confronting Collapse, again, a lot of this was foretold. This is clear. So no, I'm not getting that anymore. But what you said raises an important point, though. I was just in a 2-hour History Channel special with Jim Kunstler and some really cool people called Prophets of Doom. That wasn't the title they told us originally, but there was a really cool fact in there, and it has to do with human psychology, or even collective psychology, if you want to get Carl Jung involved. Is that if a huge dam was about to break, you tell the people 3 miles away and they get very concerned. You tell the people 2 miles away, they're even more concerned. But you tell the people living a mile away from the dam and they're completely blasé about it. They cannot accept that because it's so imminent and it has caught them so by surprise. It's like we had a commercial in the '70s for Burger King that said, "It's too big to eat," and it is for the mind for a lot of people. When you're in a crisis situation, it's very important to ask the right question. So I have to be honest and say that it is not up to me, nor do I waste a moment of time thinking about when anybody else is going to get it. What we in the lifeboat movement, the transition movement, and I bring them from all over the spectrum onto my radio show and into CollapseNet, because all we're interested in is helping people survive. What we are dealing with now is something that started as a trickle, but is now really starting to become a steady stream on its way to becoming a flood of people asking for help. So that's really all we're concerned about. It's like that story I told about the Titanic. I'm not interested in worrying about the people who refuse to admit the boat is sinking. I only want to find as many of the people who want to build lifeboats as possible and help them.
Mike, talk a little bit about the oil fields out west that are being revitalized by fracking, and is that hopeful?
First of all, fracking is something I monitor on a very close basis, so I'm very familiar with everything that's going on about fracking, and we report on that on the World News Desk at CollapseNet. I think we've turned a corner on fracking. The city of Philadelphia, using a legal tactic developed by the Community Environmental Legal Defense Fund, CELDF.org. Awesome people. Tom Lindsay runs it, have been posing legal arguments that have been winning, taking away the personhood of corporations, declaring that the earth has rights and an inherent right to local governance, which is going to save people's lives. They have stopped Nestle and Coca-Cola from taking water out of Mount Shasta. And they have prevented a number of shale gas projects, including one in Philadelphia, using this. And as I watch the press on fracking lately, which we all know by now is absolutely destructive, poisonous, toxic, murderous behavior, both toward human beings and toward the planet that we live on, Mother Earth. But I think a corner has been turned with fracking. But fracking, as my the late Matt Simmons said, is a net energy loser anyway. So it's not sustainable.
How about the revolution that we're seeing in the Middle East? How does that affect oil supply?
Well, maybe oil supply affects it. That's probably the egg before the chicken. What is happening now is not an Arab revolution. It is a generational revolution. It is a revolution coming up from people who understand that the way of life that we have known, that my generation, the baby boom, it's over. There is no pot of gold for them. And that's what's dawning around the world. And that's why, even though mainstream chooses to not highlight the fact that 40,000 people protested in the streets of Delhi, India last week over food prices. They aren't Arabs. Same in Mauritania. Same in, it's happening all over. And of course, the people in Wisconsin are carrying signs like "Fight like an Egyptian." So that's what this is. This is the start of a generational revolution. And it is probably, in my opinion, going to erupt pretty much simultaneously, because I've been predicting the events in the Wisconsin legislature and with the assault on collective bargaining, because the state pension funds are already looted anyway. And a number of American states are going to go bankrupt pretty much simultaneously. I've been calling this since last October, November, and it's all lining up that way. So this is going to hit almost like a blitzkrieg of unrest around the world. I don't think it's just an Arab revolution. There's no money to bail that out, and as we tape this even now, it's pretty unclear whether NATO can muster enough military force to go in and try to solve the situation. Now, what Libya does is number one, there's no elasticity anywhere in the global supply chain. Although the Saudi government has said they will increase production by 3 million barrels a day, I doubt it. I think they're lying through their teeth. Matt Simmons clearly established that they had passed peak. And the Saudi kingdom right now, King Abdullah, is absolutely desperate and panicked. He's offering bribes to the people, handing out $38 billion and now trying to guarantee everyone in Saudi Arabia a state job. That's a sign of desperation. The significance of Saudi Arabia is that it's 25% of the known oil on the planet. Saudi production has never passed 10 million barrels a day, ever. And yet they're claiming that they can just flip a switch and hit 12. No, they've passed their peak. So with no elasticity now, what we are looking at is a looming price spike that may be hard to describe. Iran is now in a catbird seat. No one in the world will dare attack Iran at this minute. Nobody, under any circumstances, because if Iranian production goes offline, everything is over. But there's a very good possibility as we do this today that the Libyan situation may be, well, it's going to be a bad pun, the straw that broke the camel's back of human industrial civilization.
I live 30 miles from the Capitol in Wisconsin, Madison, Wisconsin, and we've been talking about storming the Capitol for the last couple of weeks. I believe I read on your website, Mike, that it's so much more than bargaining rights that are at stake. And I just read an article recently that suggested that hidden in Walker's bill are provisions for our energy companies to be sold off on no-bid contracts.
It is so important, and I've written about this on CollapseNet extensively, a lot of free essays, that what the unions need to understand here and every place else in the world is that there is no pot of gold that somebody's holding out. There's no cash stash because money is only a symbol for energy. Money is useless without energy to give it value. That's the conundrum that we're all in. There's no coming back from this. And all that, what you tell me is in that, all that says to me is that it is known that governments are shutting down, that collapse is underway. These are desperation moves. A public employee in Wisconsin, Ohio, Indiana, New Jersey, any of these states can say, well, gee, they want to take away my pension. What you don't understand is that your pension fund is broke. It's already been looted, and they're trying to cover up the evidence. And it can't be replaced. It's not going to be replaced. And these are tough decisions. And leadership's going to be required. It's kind of brutal the way it's being launched, but in November I said that's the way it's going to happen. It's going to happen like a blitzkrieg, and very clear record that I saw this coming. So I think people just need to get a fundamental understanding that we are not going back to anything like we knew, and it's not going to be possible. And then the question is, and I addressed a lot of these issues in my latest book, Confronting Collapse, with some plans. Fortunately, a lot of time has passed, but some of those are still very important on how to save as much as possible. As far as I'm concerned, every state pension is gone everywhere in the country right now. It may still look like a couple of bites. It may look like a reduction, but it's gone. Because there's a bill moving through the House now, sponsored by Republicans, that will allow states to go bankrupt. And once that happens, when a state like California, New Jersey, Michigan, New York, Illinois, any of them, go bankrupt, and that's allowed, there is no legal recourse for the unions anyway. It's a fait accompli, and that's what's coming.
If the spigot is being turned off at this point because of the unrest in the Middle East, How do we begin to see the results here in the US?
There's one of those questions again. You mean you can't see it now? I mean,
Yeah, yeah. I still believe that lots of people are thinking, well, I can afford slightly higher gas prices to get to work. And if I have to pay 50 cents more for a loaf of bread, that's doable. Many people still think there's a fix. That's what I'm saying. There is a fix.
there is no fix. Infinite. Let's start with the most simple of concepts. Infinite growth on a finite planet is not possible. Anybody disagree with that? No. The human economic paradigm, based upon fractional reserve banking, compound interest, and fiat currency, is by definition a pyramid scheme, a Ponzi scheme, and infinite growth. That is the church that the people of that human beings have worshipped in for the duration of human industrial civilization. That's our real church. That's been our real religion. Infinite growth is ending because not only are we short of oil, unless you are brain dead, we're having massive droughts all over the world right now. Now we're using up and destroying all the fresh water on the planet. The climate is absolutely disintegrating around us. So, again, we kind of come back to it's like, how much time do we want to spend asking anybody to see this yet? What's really important, I think, and here, I really tip my hat and my heart to everybody who labored in peak oil for so many years, the Colin Campbells, the Rich Heinberg, me, but even the ones before, Ken DeFays, M. King Hubbard, Ali Samson Bakhtiari, there's a whole long list. And the people who spent all this time preparing the answers that people were going to need now. And those answers are out there. So that should take some of the panic away. It's like, take a breath. We have an oxygen mask here for you. We've been doing the work. There are many things you can do, but the first thing you have to do is to understand your exact position, because you really can't start taking a map from point A to point B until you understand where you're starting from.